Vitebsk is 250 miles due west of Moscow. It is one of the gates to the Soviet Republic of Belarus, which the Germans had held for 3 years. An important railway junction, it was a strategical hub in the Germans' defences, a bastion of their eastern wall. The Red Army's offensive of the winter and spring of 1943-44 had eaten away this heavily fortified zone and left Vitebsk enclosed in a horseshoe. The German command was determined to hold this key point and assigned 10 picked divisions for its defense. The Vitebsk bastion had to be reduced as a preliminary to the liberation of Soviet Belarus, and in the early summer of this year, the Red Army massed troops and armament for its assault. The operation was carried out by the 3rd Belarusian Army, commanded by General Chernyakhovsky, and the 1st Belarusian Army, commanded by General Bagramyan. Their task was to break through this heavily fortified zone, extending to a great depth, surround and annihilate the German forces holding it, and recover the city of Vitebsk. June the 23rd, at 1 in the same hour, from the south and the northwest, the Soviet batteries launched a fiery inferno at the Germans' positions. The air forces of the 2 Soviet armies added the weight of their blow. The infantry waited, taut and tense, to take their part in the action. When the signal came, they eagerly rose for the attack. Soviet tanks sped forward to pour into the breaches blasted in the Germans' defences by artillery and aircraft. Germans raise their hands and surrender. These are only the first trickle of what is going to be a tremendous haul of prisoners. Stormoviks supported the advance of tanks and infantry. Flying at low level, they poured a deadly fire into the Germans' battle order. This is what the Vitebsk sector of the celebrated Eastern Wall looked like after the first day of the army offensive. The avalanche swept on, liberating mile after mile of Belarusian territory. The black night of German occupation that hung over Belarus for 3 years came to an end. This was a concentration camp, where 8,000 Soviet citizens languished in mud and filth, without a roof to their heads, dying of starvation, exposure, maltreatment, and disease. The Germans, before their flight, began shooting the surviving prisoners. The Red Army's swift advance saved these people from certain doom. In all the 3 years of the German occupation, they had not eaten real bread. This little girl is 3 years old. She hadn't seen sugar in her life. The Moscow newspaper is eagerly devouring for news of their Soviet homeland. The liberated captives set out to return to their homes from they were torn by the Germans. Never will the Belarusians forget the crimes of the Nazis, and never will they... Mobile units of the 1st Belarusian Army followed in pursuit of the retreating enemy and reached the river Western Dvina. The river was forced with all the Russian soldiers' boldness, impetuosity, and resourcefulness. On the opposite bank of the river, the advance was resumed with unflagging vigor. So long, comrade. Hope to see you back in the ranks soon. The ring drew tighter and tighter around the German divisions. General Chernyakhovsky's troops broke through the German defences south of Vitebsk and pushed forward to join forces with General Bagramyan's army. The artillery blasted roads for the infantry. One by one, the Germans' last roads of retreat were cut. To the Germans' fortified zone, northwest and south of Vitebsk. On the third day, by vigorous flank attacks, they completed the encirclement of the enemy. 5 German divisions were hopelessly caught in a trap. Pressing hard on the enemy's heels and not allowing him a moment's respite, the Soviet troops forced their way into the outskirts of Vitebsk. Retreating Germans had no time even to blow up the bridge across the western Dwina, although they had made all preparations for it. The Red Army sappers removed the mines laid by the Germans. After a battle which lasted 12 hours, Vitebsk, one of the main bastions of the Germans' eastern wall, fell to the Red Army. Colonel Savchenko's regiment was the first to enter the city. Survivors, for all that was left of Vitebsk's population of over 100,000. They gave their deliverers a jubilant welcome. Sergeant Platonov, who entered the city with his regiment, found his family, whom he hadn't seen since the outbreak of the war. Vitebsk is once again a Soviet city. Southwest of Vitebsk, the Red Army proceeded to mop up the remnants of the surrounded German divisions. This is what the battlefield looked like after the action was over. Over 20,000 Germans lay down their lives here. All the armament and equipment of the surrounded divisions were left on the battlefield. A typical scene on the roads where the Germans entrapped near Vitebsk were annihilated. The last surviving remnants of the surrounded divisions accepted the Soviet ultimatum, laid down their arms and surrendered. Over 10,000 officers and men were taken prisoner. Among the prisoners were several German generals. Lieutenant General Ludnikov of the Red Army interrogates. General Gollwitzer, commander of the German 58th Army Corps. And Colonel Schmidt, his chief of staff. In this 5 days battle, the Germans lost 77,000 killed and prisoners. Such was the inglorious end of the army, which German propaganda boastfully called the Shield of the Baltic.